And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Today joined by Erica and Josh. Warm welcome to everyone here in the chat. We got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking a little trade war. I said we're going to debate USAID. I'm not sure where we all fall on this. I'm probably on the extreme end of it. And then we get a little dessert at the end of this episode of what's going on as the DNC regroups after a big loss. Spoiler, I don't think they learned many lessons.
Yeah, they're building back, not better. Pretty bummed.
You could say. But big headlines everywhere. Trump's crazy. He's starting a trade war. Trump has promised 25% tariffs on both Mexico and Canada. Again, a little bit of a spoiler. Mexico's already caved.
Yeah.
They already said that they would acquiesce to the demands. We can get into that in a second. But the major reasons, I think, were summarized by this JD Vance clip in this interview, and then we can get into it right after. So go ahead and share the screen.
Trump is really smart. He has his apprentice go out there and talk to the media.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go.
This whole idea that they're going to retaliate is they have already been taking advantage of America for decades. The retaliation is Donald Trump saying no more. We're not going to be taken advantage of anymore. And I think it's important the president is doing what he's doing. Now, look, it looks different ways and comes in different forms, whether you're talking about Canada or China or Mexico. We know that Mexico has allowed the facilitation of the illegal drug trade and illegal sex trafficking for years and has done nothing about it. If they want to be a better partner to us, the time starts now. We know the Chinese, of course, have stolen American manufacturing jobs for 30, 40 years, and also that they facilitated the trafficking of illegal fentanyl into Mexico, where the drug cartels then bring it into our country. We are sick of being taken advantage of. We still have, thank God, the biggest economy in the entire world, the best people and the best workers. But the message from President Trump to the entire world is very clear. We are done being taken advantage of, and we have a president who looks out for the interests of American citizens. Thank God we do, and we're going to try to do it the best we can.
Does he have a point?
I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I think that part of the everyone's like pulling their hair out and screaming this weekend because here come these 25% tariffs on our closest trading partners, Mexico, Canada. I know Chuck Schumer got up with a sob story about how our avocados and our beer are gonna be so expensive now, and he like holds up a Corona.
Oh, so cringe. Yeah.
It was so cringe, and I think
Corona
like
in a can anyway.
I know, right? It was even a can.
Yeah, you couldn't even do that right. That was
the
like
same
him
guy who
with
grilled
the grill.
frozen hamburgers on with cheese on them. That's the same guy who drinks.
Totally.
But man of the people.
Yeah. Like I think, yeah, you can rip on him and everything, but the problem is like Trump was not using the tariffs in order to improve the American economy per se, like as a fine tool to like do this surgery on American economic interests. It is clearly a big sledgehammer move to get Mexico to actually fall in line with multiple levels of benefiting the United States. So everything, like you said, Mexico is just caved. The proof is in the pudding. Now they are going to send 10,000 troops to the border. They are going to focus on stopping the sending of fentanyl into the United States. In return, the United States is going to focus on the illegal gun trade, where we're sending all these like high-powered weapons to Mexico. And this is exactly the point of the tariff. Trump knew that this would be an effective means to get Mexico to the table. And it worked. Like, that's what's going on here. So all this like, oh, tariffs bad, like it's working.
As of 20 minutes ago, yeah, it worked. I mean, go ahead, Josh.
Something underneath the surface that people just may not be aware of. I only became aware of this during this whole fight over tariffs. I mean, I know about like fentanyl coming across the border, from Mexico. I know about the illegal drugs and that kind of stuff. But like Canada, sleepy Canada. Well, actually, no. So what happened is Ontario, I guess, like in 2017 or something like that, radically changed the way in which they gave out licenses for truckers. And so like the number of places that give out trucking licenses in Ontario has exploded. And so we don't know who's coming across the border anymore. And there's like a whole international like kind of mafia that's running this, and there are paper mills. You don't really even have to do anything. And so we have no idea who's driving these trucks anymore. There was this film crew in Canada that went undercover, and they were going to like see if they could like buy a license to drive a truck. And they're like, oh, okay, super. They just wanted, to know if they could just like literally just buy it on the spot, just buy it on the spot and just put this thing in. The guy's basically totally corruptly saying, we'll just make it sound and you'll be able to drive no problem. Well, then the camera crew's like, okay, well, I think we're good. We're just going to, take a beat. We're not going to actually do it. And then the dude gets super upset. And he doesn't look like a Canadian, like you might know of. This is an immigrant from like the Middle East or something like that. And this guy's like, no, what are you doing? Like he was irate. And so then he told the camera crew he's going to track him down and he's going to burn him, literally screaming at them, I'm going to burn you. And like the film crew runs into the grocery store and the guy's waiting outside the grocery store for like an hour before he finally leaves. I mean, like, what in the world is going on in Canada? You just think they're just a bunch of happy-go-lucky, maple syrup growers, and you're like, dang, something has gone on in that country.
Yeah. I also found out this weekend, I learned a lot about Canada this weekend. I found out that just 3 years ago, Justin Trudeau relaxed all of the restrictions on all of the regulation around the chemicals that go into the manufacture of fentanyl. So although fentanyl itself is still technically illegal up there, the actual manufacture of it is almost completely unregulated. And so this has just exploded the fentanyl production up there. Gee, I wonder where the trucks are taking all that fentanyl. There's not that many people in Canada down to here.
Somebody on Twitter referred to the current and soon to be leaving Prime Minister of Canada as Justin Castro, spell out the French way.
I'm just convinced. So I want to get into some numbers here, but before, I'm convinced that so many people have never been a part of a successful business negotiation ever. Like watching people freak out over the weekend about avocados, beer. It was
Eric Erickson is absolutely the worst. He's a so-called conservative. He's never Trumper. He was going bananas.
He's terrible. Yeah. But this is what happens, right? Like you use your leverage to negotiate on behalf of either yourself or your clients to get the best possible outcome. If it doesn't work out, yes, there could be negative impacts in the case of tariffs. But looking at Mexico currently, looking at Canada right now with the outgoing Trudeau, there's tons of leverage for the United States to actually defend its interests, protect its borders. I mean, I was even looking into the numbers here. You see fentanyl talked about a lot with Canada. The CBP actually picked up 43 pounds of fentanyl at the Canadian border. And that's only what they picked up. That's not what actually got through. This was for last year. And I was laughing. There was someone on Twitter who thought they were making a big dunk on these people. Like, oh my gosh, only 43 pounds. Do you know how little that is? That could kill like hundreds of thousands of Americans. Right. The smallest amount of fentanyl can kill you. So like, great dunk there. You're saying that you want this to come across our border. So yes, we have a legitimate issue with fentanyl, no question. 73,000 Americans died from drug overdoses involving fentanyl in 2022. That's the most recent number we have. But assuming we kept even close to that pace, this is one of the leading killers of Americans, period, of any cause right now. So yes, we have that. And then illegals. So over the past 4 years, and this is what we caught actually at the border, we're talking about encounters, 9.43 million. It's hard to even put that in perspective. Yeah. The number is much closer to 20 or 30 million. That's a very significant percentage of the current U.S. population. So asking our partners, quote unquote, to actually tighten the screws at the border, I don't think is unreasonable at all. If anything, this should have been done 4 years ago if we had competent leadership in charge. So I see it as a tactic, and it's clearly working so far with Mexico. I think Canada's going to follow here pretty soon.
Well, and I think ultimately what the U.S. might start leaning on is saying, listen, like, for example, you're not catching much of the drugs at the border precisely because we've had a great relationship with Canada. It's been our number one trading partner forever. And we have the largest, most peaceful border on planet Earth between two countries. And it's been great for decades and decades and decades. And we would love for it to continue that way. The fact of the matter is, though, it relies on like trust. You know, like here in the United States, we're a high trust society. Like if we suddenly don't become a high trust society like we do in some of our inner cities, then we have a problem. Right. And the trust is starting to fall a little bit between us because we don't check think about how tedious, how time consuming, how much of a backlog it would be if we actually had to physically inspect each and every one of the semi-trucks going in and out of the border.
We do it in Mexico.
Yeah, but like we don't want that to be the case for Canada. What we want is Canada to have reliable carriers. And so maybe what Trump says is like, look, these 7 companies are entrusted to do transcontinental stuff to come across the border. Anyone else, we're not letting them in. and you do it that way. And it's not like we're trying to prop up certain businesses, but we just don't want anyone and their brother coming across the border who buys a license in a parking lot at a grocery store. So I think that's kind of what it's getting at, because then you can reestablish that trust factor, because that's what happens is the truck then goes to Indiana, and then all of a sudden they wait, what? And there's a ton of fentanyl in it. And it's like, oh, because it got across the border, because we don't check every truck, because we don't want to be in that situation. We don't want to have to be in that situation.
It's time to start.
Common sense, the golden age.
Well, and the thing is, why do we, you talked at the top, Tom, about the leverage or whatever. Like, why is there leverage here? If the U.S. starts a trade war with China in a massive way, it's very risky, precisely because they buy so many of our treasuries, and because our industrial base has been gutted so much because of China, that we are actually dependent on China. That's not the case with Mexico or Canada, but like Canada is like something like 7% or 8% or whatever it is of our trading, thing. If we suddenly couldn't trade with them anymore, it would be a blip. It would make it, certain sectors would be hurt. I'm not going to try to belittle people. Like, wait a minute, that would be, I get it, but overall, in terms of the U.S. economy, we could muster that storm. Same with Mexico. Yeah. The opposite, though, is for them, Canada, it would ruin them. If we suddenly put these massive 25% tariffs. And that's why Mexico, put the white flag up right away, because they realized
it would ruin Mexico.
Yeah, it would ruin Mexico even further. And so, again, if we did this trade war, these tariffs, in order to just extract property, like, that we're doing this just so we want to, take over Vancouver or something like that, that would be unjust. But our demands are just. We want Mexico to secure, put troops on the border to make sure that not so many people are coming across here illegally. And we want something to be done with what's going on with fentanyl coming across.
Yeah. I would say, though, too, like, it's definitely not over with Mexico. So it's going to get ugly again at some point, because the issue of corruption with the Mexico government is so real. Like, they've been in bed with the cartels for so long that even if you're sending Mexican troops to the border, those troops are being directed by a government that is so ingrained and enmeshed with those drug cartels that who knows how effective that will actually be.
Excuse me. Correction. So the Mexican president, Sheinbaum, came forward after Trump threatened these.
She assures us.
She says confidently that actually we categorically reject the U.S. statement that Mexico has ties to drug cartels. Direct quote. And upon a very cursory search, I found a policy called Hugs Not Bullets, where the Mexican government basically willfully ignores the cartel, and the army uses citizens as human shields against them.
Bullets.
That's a real
policy.
Yeah, it's a real policy. I think Sheinbaum may have rescinded it, but that was the previous president's approach to the cartel.
Just your friendly neighborhood drug lord.
So,
give him a hug.
I mean, really just like laughable at this point. I even saw specifically in the Trump tweet, or I think it might have been on True Social, he said, I just spoke with President, I'll share it. Hilarious. And to make your point about it being kind of a tentative deal, I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for 1 month, during which we will have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in these negotiations with President Sheinbaum as we attempt to achieve and then in scare quotes, deal.
Deal.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, we'll see. I think there's going to be more drama down there for sure. I mean, this
No
is
doubt.
years in the making. It's going to be years in the offing, but this is a good start. I think it's why Trump came in with the chainsaw. I mean, he is challenging Javier Milei of Argentina for the title chainsaw president for sure, because he knows it's going to be a tough fight. So he came out swinging. And
yep. And I'm here for it. And I think Canada and Mexico kind of speak for themselves. As Josh was saying, we have a large trade surplus with both countries. We're going to be just fine if we don't have to work with them. It'd be preferable to work with them. I remind everyone of a former president.
They have a trade surplus with us.
Right. We're going to be just fine. So a quote from a former president: under free trade, the trader is the master and the producer is the slave. Protection is but the law of nature, the law of self-preservation and of self-development, of securing the highest and best destiny of the race of man. Any guesses on the quote? Come on,
I know
Josh.
the answer, so I'm not going to say it.
Do you know, Josh?
Do I know this? Jefferson. I don't know.
William
Ooh.
McKinley,
McKinley.
He's
father
a
of
big
tariff
free
theory.
trader.
Should have been on Rushmore with Jefferson, but he got shot.
But I'll say that, and the reason I bring up that quote in
For
response to
presidents who don't
China,
get shot. No.
I bring up that quote in reference to what we were talking about with China. Yes, we're entangled in a much more complicated trade agreement with them currently.
McKinley.
Yeah.
They are very responsible in a lot of ways for the fentanyl crisis we're currently seeing. They're not really doing enough. If anything, they're doing a lot to actually export the chemicals used in production of fentanyl that have been a significant contributor to the opioid crisis in the United States. And currently, we do have a trade deficit with China through, I would say, some very poor agreements that we made with them. We've basically outsourced most of our manufacturing over there. I don't know. I personally have done a lot of research on this. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to get back to the manufacturer level, or even if we want to as a country, get back to the manufacturing level we were at pre these trade agreements. I would say, again, if you talk using tariffs as a tool, I think there's definitely strategic and national security interests for bringing back some manufacturing to America, no question. So we'll see. I'm a little bit more skeptical on what's going to happen with China. I just feel like we're in a big hole there. Hopefully this is the start of digging it out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
what I would do with China real quick would be, I would install tariffs that would serve as sort of an arbitrage. So basically, they're free trade absolutists, who love like free trade. And it's like, well, I mean, I for the most part like free trade ish, I guess. And it's like, let Canada make maple syrup and cut down the trees to give us paper, and we'll all get better at what we get better at, and we become interdependent. And that's not necessarily a bad thing necessarily, it was so long as the countries are, for the most part, aligned with us and don't seek domination. And China does seek domination, though, and so does Russia. So that's kind of the problem. And it's also the case that China's like, well, we can make a ton of manufacturing here at below market rates by basically using slave labor, like the Uyghurs and all that other stuff, and also just pay our people crappy wages. And if it's communism, or really it's fascism now. Yeah. And if they complain, we just send them, to the gulag or whatever. And so they're able to produce and build a big manufacturing base that we are now dependent on them. And they can sell the products at so low because they use slave labor. Well, that's the point. You should put tariffs on it so that they don't enjoy competitive advantage by employing slave labor. Exactly. So we basically say, so long as you use slave labor, we're going to put taxes on this. And I love people. I mean, I love the free market. But all these capitalists, so-called capitalists like McConnell and Eric Erickson, like, you do realize you're just taxing yourself. Like, listen, idiot. What I'm doing is trying to prevent China from using and deploying slave labor and getting an economic advantage of that, and so that they can tie a noose around our neck and choke us in 20, 30 years. Like, this is stupid. So, it's not free trade if you're trading with a country that involves itself in slavery, period.
Yes. And I think something really interesting that a lot of the coverage missed about the executive order with the tariffs, was that Trump also ended the de minimis loophole.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And that's the loophole in trade where it's a tariff exemption where the goods that come in, the packages under $800 in US dollar value, if they come in under $800, then they're exempt from customs declarations. They're exempt from all of these other, requirements that we put on larger trade for slave labor, for rights, et cetera, et cetera. So the de minimis provision, he ends it. And so this is going to affect those Chinese companies like Temu, right? You see all of those ads on football games for like $2 for a sundress. Ooh, Nike
Shein.
Air, Shein, all of those. So they are going to have to start being subject to, under this executive order, they will be subject to exactly what Josh is talking about. And they'll be subject to the tariffs as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, if it survives legal challenges, et cetera.
It should. I mean, the de minimis thing, the way they get around that is instead of shipping a ton of their stuff into crates in Los Angeles, and then
Right.
sending it out that way. They just do all direct response. They literally just, here, it's just mail. We're just sending mail. And,
That's why it takes like 2 months to get your like crappy
But
sundress.
that's actually not the
I've never
only.
tried to do that.
That's not the only use of the loophole. They actually use it to send a lot of drugs here too. They actually use it for a lot of illegal shipping as well.
Yep.
But I will say, to round this out, maybe I have become deeply skeptical of free trade absolutists. To Josh's point, it only works if you have honest partners. And I find it like a hilarious argument that like, oh, well, you have an iPhone right now. Aren't you streaming off an iPhone? Didn't you like buying that? Is like, so you're arguing on behalf of slave labor in China? I mean, if you look at the chocolate industry, slave labor in Africa, like that isn't that is not a serious argument. And for me, back to the McKinley quote, it's more important to me that Americans have good jobs and could sustain their lives. I am so not sympathetic to the consultant class, to the executive class that kind of jet sets around the world and doesn't care about, say, a small town in Ohio, and will just lift the factory out of there and send it overseas if it saves them a few bucks. I'm thinking on behalf of the country as somewhat of a labor union to protect a way of life, a good way of life for Americans. Call me communist, call me whatever. I don't care. I don't want to live in a world in which you can save a few bucks, but people are living in destitution in America. They don't have good jobs available to them. They don't have the protections that should be afforded to Americans. So no, I don't want to play ball with China and take their crappy goods that they're just going to end up manipulating and using against us. I look at China completely destroying the American steel industry in the 2000s, basically by using currency games and manufacturing games. I think that's a humongous net loss to America. There's no way around that. And I would like to see that back. And I think it was a tremendous mistake to say doing business with China was somehow going to turn them into more of a democracy. If anything, it's been demonstrably the other way. It's turned them much worse. So,
hey, can I put in a plug? Someone in the chat's asking, whatever happened to USA Made? Okay, so go on over to refinelife.co, not .com, .co. Subscribe to Refine because we have a series. We're the lifestyle newsletter. 3 times a week, we have a series called Made in America. We kicked it off last week with clothing companies' t-shirts made in America. And we have kids' toys coming and kids' clothing coming later this month. So make sure you're subscribed to Refine so you too can find companies that only make it in America.
That's awesome.
One
of my favorite things to do now is I'll do thrift shopping. And just a small example of this would be if you go to like Goodwills and stuff. I don't want to put too many people onto this because then maybe I'll lose out on some fines. But if you go and find suits specifically and look inside of the tag, you can find 100% wool, 100% silk suits that were custom made in America. So for example, I'll go and find one and be like, this was made in Terre Haute, Indiana. You're like, when was Terre Haute, Indiana in the business of making suits? Not long ago. And the quality is insane, and that's why people still thrift to go buy these. These are just people getting rid of them from their closets.
My son tells me that's always the best thing to get a thrift shop.
I always go check out the suit codes Sundays, and then you can go tailor it too, so you can get it tailored to your body. But if you go to like a department store now, where's it made? It's made in China. It's made of like polyester, fake material, whatever. We used to make really amazing things in this country. Part of that was because we didn't open up to these kind of unfair trade tariff games that are going on now. So little plug, go put you onto that. Let's get into USAID. So USAID, how do we start at the beginning of this debate?
How do we start?
Erica, you said you were arguing with some of your relatives over the USAID freeze. What was done and what's being talked about now are two different things. In the beginning, what was done? USAID, or for those that don't know, the U.S. Agency for International Development. It's an independent agency of the United States federal government, primarily responsible for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance. This was paused by President Trump for a 90-day review of how we administer this aid. So the arguments of people that were upset about this were, oh my gosh, we're stopping giving food. We're not giving medicine to poor countries in Africa that need this kind of help. That was the main argument. The argument from the other side is that this has been abused, somewhat in the open for everyone to see. Examples that personally frustrate me, USAID has been open secret funding regime changes across the world. You can look them up if you want to go more in depth, but we were definitely involved in Ukraine in 2014, Venezuela in the 2000s, Haiti in 2004, Egypt in 2011, 2013, Bolivia in 2019, most recently in Syria. And so this aid money promised for these countries ends up either getting lost or it ends up going to an NGO that funds an opposition group to whatever current regime's going on. I saw an interesting tweet from Nayib Bukele, who's like, yeah, we all know what comes with taking USAID, the strings that come with it.
All right, before you get into that, I guess I have a question. So you're saying that Catholic lefties like Father James Martin freaked out about this freeze on USAID spending. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I want to understand.
Yep.
I'm guessing it is the belief of Father James Martin that USAID is a wonderful program and it helps out so many good people. And why would you ever want to freeze it? I'm guessing that's what he thinks. Is that correct?
I can't read his mind, but yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, if it's such a good program, then surely pausing it for like 90 days is just kind of an inconvenience because, it's meant to help people. But it's such a great program that once we give a thorough examination over the course of these 90 days, obviously there won't be any problems in restarting it up again for everyone that needs it, because it's such great funding and there couldn't possibly be any bad funding at all or any strings or weird stuff in it, right? I mean, so there surely isn't any problem with this freeze, right?
I feel like I'm in a legal drama right now. Are you asking leading questions?
Seems like a little rhetorical question going on.
It's almost like they spend a bunch of crap on a bunch of crappy stuff too. I mean, in other words, this is what they do. They hold you hostage. Like, you don't want to help these poor kids, these poor African kids, in Zimbabwe or whatever it is. How dare you? You're so evil. And then you find out wait, $7 million was going to help out transgender surgeries in Nicaragua or something like that. And you're like, what the heck is going on with this thing? It's one thing if you take money from poor people in Ohio and give it to starving people in Africa. It's like, okay, I guess. But it's
Well, and the language that the mainstream media is using is he's ending USAID. He's destroying USAID. It's done. It's over. It's extinct. And all these people lost their jobs and they were sent on furloughs. And the Catholic left has totally adopted that language of, he ended it. But again, like you said, Josh, this is a freeze. It is a review period. It is, and to even push it a step further, Marco Rubio put out a waiver on the freeze that specifically says it does not apply to, quote, life-saving humanitarian assistance, defined as, quote, life-saving medicine, medical services, food, shelter, and subsistence assistance, as well as supplies and reasonable administrative costs as necessary to develop such assistance. It's almost like the Trump administration wants to continue the good work of USAID while cutting out the crap, which everyone should agree on. This is what I love, though. In that same waiver, another quote, the waiver will not apply, quote, to activities that involve abortions, family planning conferences, gender or DEI ideology programs, transgender surgeries, or other non-life-saving assistance, all of which activities have been documented as happening under USAID. You all might remember PEPFAR. Who remembers PEPFAR? That's our program overseas reproductive services. We've been pushing abortion into Africa. The African Catholic Church, the bishops of the Catholic Church in Africa, have come out and said, do not accept PEPFAR because they are trying to sterilize our women. They're killing our babies with abortion. It's against our faith. And still, it continued to persist. PEPFAR paused. Absolutely. Anyway,
again,
it's all out there.
One of those axioms of government funding, right? So when we say we need to take a beat on what's going on here, only approve the life-saving stuff, and then the other monkey business that we shouldn't be spending money on, let's pause that, and the media immediately freaks out. And just what they do is, there's a word for it. Oh, that's it. They lie.
Oh, they lie.
The same thing with the freeze on the budget last week, where they're like, Trump is like, let's just all, the discretionary spending, let's just stop it. But all the other stuff that's involves entitlement stuff, we won't stop. So Meals on Wheels, Medicaid, Medicare, all that stuff, Social Security, we're not going to stop that. You explicitly say in your order and to the press, it does not cover this. Yeah. We're freezing stuff, but we're not going to freeze A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, you got it? We're not going to freeze Social Security. We're not going to freeze Meals on Wheels. We're not. The media goes, oh my gosh, they're freezing spending on Meals for Wheels. The Democrats lie through their teeth.
Bald-faced lie.
It's it drives people crazy. How can we talk about a trust society? How can we have a trust society when you guys You know they're lying, and you don't care.
Yeah, there's a great clip. This isn't USAID, but the State Department spending and examples of. So part of the problem is USAID as well. It's like not only you guys are talking about the ridiculous uses, and there are many ridiculous uses. It legitimately is the United States having global influence, funding regime changes, playing global superpower. And that bothers me the most. And there is wasteful spending, no question. And people love to get all percentage when you talk about, oh, this is such a small percentage of whatever. And I was like, that's the
Margaret Brennan
dumbest
this
argument.
weekend.
So anyway, I have a clip before I rant about this. It just makes me mad. Here we go.
Of people throughout the State Department, other agencies where we're freezing aid. These are all very important and necessary steps to make sure that we secure America, and we're going to support that.
I'm sorry, can I follow up on what you just said there? You want to authorize purging of State Department personnel? What does that mean exactly?
Well, if you want to take a look at the State Department, where DEI has been a priority over, let's say, diplomacy in many accounts, I could give you hundreds of examples of where they were authorizing. Sure, let's list them off. $500,000 to expand atheism in Nepal, $50,000 to do, let's see, a transgender opera in Colombia, $47,000 to do an LGBTQ trans comic book in Peru, $20,000 a pop to do drag shows in Ecuador. Shall I continue with more examples of where DEI was the priority?
It certainly seems like there could be a review of things. Foreign aid, as you know, is less than 1% of the entire federal budget. So we're talking small amounts of money by comparison.
All right, now
I love that argument.
Was subtle.
After, are you even sure what you're talking about? He goes, example A, B, C, D, E, F, boom. Like, why do we need a transgender comic book or a transgender opera? I mean, this stuff is kind of crazy.
I love her response.
And she's like, well, it doesn't involve that much money. It's like less than 1% of the budget. It's like, you know what? I would love to be known. I'm an American. And we travel overseas. I'd love people to go, wait, is you're the country that funds a transgender comic book in this country? Why the hell are you doing this? I'm like, I know, it's embarrassing. I'm sorry.
I wish what he'd said back was, I really don't care, Margaret. It's going to be like the theme of Trumpers going on.
Just universal treatment at this point.
I really don't care, Margaret.
Just, a subtle switch in strategy there. It's like, once you provide me exactly what I asked you for and I don't like the answer to it, I'm going to start talking about percentages and say that it's actually insignificant. I would actually.
We could take that money we saved, Margaret, and we could give it to, poor kids in Ohio.
Or we could give it to North Carolina. We could give it to actual crises going on in our country.
And if we really wanted to go for the deep blue, we could even give it to LA. Like, come on, what could that build? What could $500,000 do for North Carolina or LA?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few interesting things I see going on, which actually beyond my wildest expectations of what Trump was going to do 2.0. Number one, and Rubio reaffirmed this as well. America's kind of taking a step back from treating the world and itself like we are the world's superpower. And some people might see that and be like, oh my gosh, that's really bad. It's a step back. Yes, it probably is a step back. We're coming back and we're acknowledging the world for what it is right now, that it's a multipolar, multi-powered society where there's China, there's the United States, and there's Russia. And I think this is especially seen in how we're basically freezing foreign aid right now and USAID to be like, all right, we need to take a step back and reassess our priorities. Also, we're no longer just going to act as if Canada, Mexico, all these different countries that benefit from our military parachute actually treat us the way that we should be treated. We're going to secure our own borders. We're going to get our priorities straight, and we're going to reemerge to the world unified, stronger. I think this needed to be done a long time ago. We've been operating as if this wasn't reality. It's reality. We're doing it right now. Yeah. Number two, I will say, is that Trump realized the biggest problem are not Democrats. It's people within the government that never got elected, that have been there forever, that act as if they get to operate independent of any type of oversight at all. Any oversight by the American people, because we elected to put Trump into office to go do that. For example, he immediately put 2 people on leave from USAID. And these USAID guys were like, oh my gosh, under the first administration, we operated in the background. We weren't in the foreground. That's how we liked it. And they admitted that to a reporter out loud. What is that saying to me? It's saying that you liked operating with no oversight and you can do whatever you want.
I mean, who doesn't like operating with no oversight?
Those days are over. See ya. I mean, we're finding out that it's actually people in the government that never got elected that are the people causing all these problems. Trump, day one, came in and said, these people are gone. We're going to find creative ways to fire them. We're going to move them around. We're going to do what we have to do. Those days are over. We're getting rid of them.
One of my relatives sent me over the weekend this podcast by Heather Cox Richardson, and those of you who don't know Heather, she's an American historian, and she started off by flipping out about Elon Musk and what she called doggy. So she made the same error that I did originally. Doge is how you pronounce it, Heather. She flipped out about how Elon Musk is an unelected government appointee from Trump appointee. And I'm like,
are those a problem? Because I was
oh,
informed by the left that that's not a problem.
I was informed by Obama that all those czars that were running our country, none of them were elected. They weren't a problem. They were good because they agreed with Heather on what ought to be done and what progress meant. And now that we have Trump appointing czars that she doesn't like, somehow the tables are turned. Oh, how the turns have tabled. Yes.
Well, I do want to hit back on that point that you just mentioned in brief, Tom, though. It is true. Marco Rubio, excellent Secretary of State, by the way. He's a looper.
Catholic.
Love you, Marco.
That. He reads the loop.
And on LOOPcast.
But the thing is, he is understanding. Like, we had a moment, obviously, right after World War II, for a good 50 years there, where we had two superpowers in the world, Soviet Union and the United States. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, and before Putin got the band back together there, we were the only superpower, and that's the way it's been for the last 30 years. In fact, France had a way of saying it, hyperpower, in fact, because it was just, we were so much larger than really any other power by an order of magnitude. And then therefore, when it came to, not just, the Iraq war, when it came to Afghanistan, when it came to, making sure the Korean Peninsula is safe, everywhere all over the world, we're very extended. And overextended, I would say, and then Ukraine and all this other stuff. And you start to wonder, like, how much longer can the taxpayers of this country provide their sons and daughters for these global wars, and the treasury needed to finance them, especially when countries in Europe are paying like 1% for their defense, instead of the 3% that could be, which that even should be cranked up from.
It's outrageous.
And so what we're seeing is a recognition that we cannot continue on this way for that much longer. I mean, again, it doesn't cost much to pay for this or opera in Peru or whatever. It's like, wait a minute, we are borrowing money from the Chinese to pay for that. Does that make sense? So anything that we're going further and further into debt. Like, this is not the way to do it. And again, like when it comes to debt, like a lot of people, well, Clinton, everything was great with Clinton. There were hardly any debt. Why? Why was that? It's because the baby boomers are in a massive demographic bubble, and they were in their prime earning years from like 93 to 2003. That's why we had such a huge surge of income. Right. And now we have a shrinking population. And so we have cha-ching, that's going to cost us a lot in Social Security. And if we don't get policies where we get, stop being so overextended abroad. And that's what Rubio's talking about, multipolar, like, it's not just one hyperpower anymore. The United States is probably the first amongst, other big powers. China, obviously, very much a big power in the Orient. And then you've got Russia that's trying to build and exert its influence as well. And so we need to be a little bit more strategic. That's why he's talking about Panama. Does he actually really want to own Panama? No, but it's making sure that China doesn't have the canal, that we have that. Like, if you need any help Panama building anything, we're here, but we don't want China cutting us off. Like, that would just cut us. Can you imagine? Well, we couldn't sail from one coast to the other coast. That'd be terrible. And that's why he's talking about Greenland. He wants the shipping lanes. But you know what China has done? That people may not know this, but like ships coming in, by Finland and, by Denmark and whatever, the Chinese are cutting ships off. They're like wrecking them. And it's like, what is going on? Like, why is China? And so we need to exert, for our own national interest, and stop trying to be everybody's policeman, stop trying to be everybody's, ATM. We can't do that.
Josh, I'm not sure if you saw, but Panama actually is not going to renew their Belt and Road Initiative with China, which is basically their version of USAID. They just hand people money to build bridges and
China. Was giving them a ton of money. That agreement back in 2017. So
it's huge.
President of Panama yesterday, after meeting with Rubio, good job, Rubio, said, that old agreement the other government did, it's done. We're over, and we're going to work with and partner with the United States.
Yes,
that's great. Because smart. The Monroe Doctrine is really the oldest U.S. foreign policy. And that's where we said, we're going to try to avoid entanglements in European conflicts. That didn't work out so well in the 20th century. But at least the idea was for the 19th century, and let it be the 21st century now too, is that we want to make sure global powers aren't trying to come into North and South America, because we know it would just be to establish a beachhead. That's what China was trying to do with the Panama Canal. So, again, Donald Trump understands this. I feel like he's 2 or 3 chess moves ahead of a lot of other people on this.
Yeah, and I think like all of the hue and cry that, oh, Trump's an isolationist and he just wants us to be insulated within our borders and it's going to drag us down. That's not the point of what's going on at all. Like the reason why he wants to secure the Panama Canal for free trade with regulation, for reasonable free trade, is to reorder our relations on the international level. This is a bringing back into a right order of the way that the United States interacts with other countries. It's not isolationism. It's saying we went way too far in this direction. Yeah, things got out of control in the 20th century.
Because it wasn't just Panama. Like China was starting to establish relationships with like Peru and these other countries, in our hemisphere. Yeah. So it's like, hold on a second, guys.
Exactly. And it's if we don't take these actions, we're going to be forced into isolation by China, which is going to infringe on our borders, which they're trying to do through the illegal immigration open borders that we've been living under. And so I think that the charges of isolationism are getting the whole picture wrong and the long game wrong of what Trump's actually trying to do here.
All right, you guys ready for dessert?
Yes, I love dessert.
So the DNC has elected a new chair and vice chair. Josh, are you familiar? A son of Minnesota, Ken Martin. Are you familiar with Ken?
I cannot say that I am.
Endorsed by Tim Walz, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think you would be boys with him. Let's put it that way. So the Democratic National Committee, they are holding their chairmanship election. So this event took place February 1st. Party's winner meeting in National Harbor, Maryland, was focused on electing a new chairperson of the DNC. To my understanding, and Josh, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of like a big, we got to regroup. We got to think about how we approach the party going forward. And the vice chair and chair are responsible for a lot of the fundraising, messaging, that kind of thing. Is that
exactly. I mean, what we've done, with campaign finance reform over the last 25 years or so is that we've basically neutered in many ways the strength of our political parties. The political parties used to have a considerable lot more power. And so now all they really do is they get on TV and they say stuff, but they have no real means of putting too much influence on members of Congress who go their own way and say their own things. But they do. Their job is to raise money for the party. That's both sides, Democrats and Republicans. And so this was an opportunity to say, okay, wait a minute. We expected to, the Democrats, they expected to win, or at least make it
Brat
close.
Summer.
It wasn't like a squeaker like 2016. It wasn't a landslide like Trump said, I'll be honest, but it was decisive, like 1.5 points or whatever. It was much bigger than most people had assumed it was possible. Of course, yours truly had correctly predicted.
It was not a surprise to the Oracle of Petoskey.
All right, so they brought out the big guns. I believe they have Cori Bush and Jen Psaki up here on the stage. I had Rosie go through and find me the highlights, so I'm just going to be playing them.
Well, that guy in the middle, too, is the guy that was so rude to the conservative author. On that
Carson?
show. I just can't stand him. It was, why am I drawing a blank on him? Anyway, whatever.
Opening statements. Each candidate will have 30 seconds, and we'll start with Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
Good evening, everyone. It is my desire to be the next DNC chair, and I just want to give you all a little bit of something that's been on my heart here over the last couple of days. You fight on, you fight on, you fight on, you fight on. When your government is doing you wrong, you fight on, oh, you fight on.
Wow.
Government as a...
Thank you, Dr. Hathaway.
That was the opening statement?
Poetry. That was the opening.
It's more like it's harkening back to like a Negro spiritual song, right?
I get that. I know.
Because to her, government is new church, right?
The overseer, the master of the plantation. Is this like theater kid? So that's like Ketanji Brown Jackson level right there. That was special. That was her.
Next clip. I think we have dancing.
We'll go with her.
Oh, come on. You can do the Cupid shuffle. This is
I was going to say,
you know what? Takedown.
Hot take on this.
I love
Trump has the YMCA dance. They're just trying to, everyone likes to dance.
You know? Yeah. Okay.
All right. That's a swing and a miss, Rosie.
Swing and a miss.
We'll allow it. Whatever.
Am I seeing Destiny was
I
here?
See
Oh, Destiny was here.
Whoa.
In a little.
Who's Destiny? Is that a person? I don't even know.
He's a streamer, I think.
Man. Yeah, he's like a big YouTuber.
Bringing out the.
Very sad.
Is on the iPad on like one of those?
Yeah, bringing out the big guns. Okay, so the next one is some leadership demands.
Specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender.
Whoa.
Wait, what?
So again,
aren't there like 72
this is what
genders?
we have to do for this vice chair.
Oh my gosh.
Race. We have to elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender.
I mean, he's confused himself.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on.
And why are all these pronouns up on the screen? Like,
for the audio listeners, I'm going to
them.
try my best. We have theirs, zim, their, her, z, she, his, z, they, them.
This is
zim,
exhausting.
Hers, they, him, he. I think he's saying that you have to vote for one. So before it was kind of easy, right? You could vote for 1 woman, 1 man. Now that we have some new parts of the equation, so you have to. So they're trying their best to like turn it into thirds, I think.
Well, oh man.
I don't know.
But if there are 72 genders, that means you need 1 representative of each gender for it to be balanced.
What I don't understand is they already said that they had 2 male and 2 female, and they're going to elect 1 more female and 1 more male. And then the last one is of any gender. So it's not going to be balanced then. That's the point.
Yeah,
like that 1 person would be the tiebreaker.
Well, you sound like
I think you're doing
non-binary.
Yeah, you're doing like white
sound like a
man
bigot.
math.
Yeah.
That's 2 plus 2 is not 4, Mercer.
And I didn't hear you start the show with a land acknowledgement as they did at the DNC. And you're kind of showing your privilege right now, dare I say. But for those that were concerned that it might be too secular, that it wasn't inclusive of religious folk, they did say a prayer if you guys are interested.
Oh boy.
May the endless, boundless energy of the universe wrap around you with awe and love and well-becoming. Amen, Ashe, Amin, and may we together make it so.
Gotta wear the Roman collar. I love
why is she wearing a collar?
Hey, at least they tried.
When people like this. This is the Democratic Party, which continues to give us this insanity. Whereas the Trump administration is bringing back normalcy. They had an email that went out on Friday that's saying no longer can federal employees have their pronouns in their email signature. To which Louisiana Senator John Kennedy said, "Looks like he, she has become, was, were." Love that guy.
So they ended up electing this guy, Ken, and then David Hogg, young man, 24, the vice chair. I believe in his speech, he said that Democrats lost the youth vote by 20 points and that we need to win them back. So they're bringing him out to do so. Yeah, I would say if you look at the Quinnipiac poll recently, I believe favorability for Democrats is in the 30s right now. Trump is enjoying, I think, record high favorability. Do you think this is actually a case of like just political suicide? I don't, it feels like voters basically decisively voted against this. And so therefore they double down harder and we're going to go harder on the identity politics stuff. Or is this just everyone getting hyped up at the DNC? I don't know, Josh, like, what do you think?
Well, I predicted that after the Republicans won, this is before the election, I said not only would Trump win the popular vote, but then Democrats, the lesson that they would get on this was not that they needed to like kind of pull away from the edge and not be totally psycho, but that they would double down. And I do feel that they're going to double down. They did a little bit of window dressing, allowing a few Democrats to break from the party and support the Lake and Riley Act, which is like so obviously common sense. Like how can it should be 100-0 vote in the Senate, right? But they can't, they only like what, a hand, 20 of them, but still not a majority. So again, all the rules for even electing the people in their party, it's got to be these land acknowledgments, and you got to elect so many of each gender and all this other kind of stuff, and all the racial quotas too. They've had racial quotas in selecting of their delegates going back to like 1972. That's what happened. The lefties took over the Democratic Party in 1972 with McGovern, and that's what they instituted all this stuff. 50% of the seats had to be for women and all this stuff. So you basically change the rules so that you'll always win. So no matter what, you're going to you've made it a progressive party. So the Catholic Democrat, pro-labor Democrats, they might, they lost their party in 1972. They just didn't realize it till 2024.
Right. No, I think they are going to double down. And it was interesting too to watch all of this. And yeah, I think was it Twilight Zone on Friday? We had them all raising their hands to like, do you think misogyny and racism played the major role in the outcome of the election? And everyone in the audience raises their hand. Everyone on stage raised their hand. And again, like they're doubling down on the Clinton deplorable strategy, and it didn't work. In a way, I love to see it, but I also hate to see it, because I would like to have a country where both parties have some semblance of sanity. Because as you pointed out, Josh, the pendulum will swing back, and the Democrats will enjoy power again in our lifetime at some point.
If this is the messaging, I don't think so. I mean, I think that maybe a Josh Shapiro or someone like that has the political talent to do it. But if this is really the message that they're putting out,
what you need is to have the Democratic Party to lose more than one time. What you really need to do is for them to be out of the White House for 12 years. Okay,
that sounds
so
good.
what happened
I'm here
with
for that.
Reagan won in 1980, and then in 84, and then his successor won in 88. And so 12 years in the wilderness, Democrats like, we got to do something different. And so one of the things that they started to do, like, my senator at the time, Paul Wellstone, got elected. He was a communist. And he's like, he went out of his way to be like, we opposed the war in Iraq. This is the first one, 1991. But he said, I love the troops. We're not against the troops. And so they cleansed themselves from a lot of very negative media that they had earned rightfully in the 60s and the 70s by making it seem like not only were they against Vietnam War, but they were against the men and women who were drafted.
Right.
And so like my dad, when he was driving to base, they would tell him, don't come to the base in your uniform. Come in plain clothes, because you might get stopped you're stopping at a red light and someone might see the uniform. They might harm you because you're in the uniform. That's what was going on with
shameful.
That. It's just like, you understand how big of a hole, how radical they had become on that, right? That had to happen. And so, but if they had only lost one election, or maybe only two presidential elections, that wasn't enough. They needed to lose 3 times to feel the pain and say, what do we got to do to get back power? We'll save on this issue. And so that's why Bill Clinton goes and says, has that sister soldier moment where this is too radical, this kind of, and pushes her to the side. And it says, I want value chips and TVs. So, value chip, the V chip or whatever, so that you don't have this disgusting stuff on TV for parents, and allow public schools to have school uniforms. He was doing all these things to try to show, and I'm for welfare reform, all these things to like, I'm not totally crazy. That's what it took. I mean, Bill Clinton in 1992 is more Republican than half the Republicans in Congress, today. Yeah. But that's what we need to. We need Trump not only to win now, we need Vance to win 2 full terms for Democrats to go, gosh, maybe we shouldn't borrow money from China to pay for transgender surgery on people who illegally cross the border in our custody. Hello. Maybe we shouldn't take men and put them in women's prisons just because they say their name is Sally now.
So I think the reaction to JD Vance's Odo or Maurice clip, think is indicative of it, which continues. People are still mad about it, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
It's indicative of a few things. I mean, like, for example, I see this poll from New York Times. Many Americans say the Democrat Party does not share their priorities. A poll from the New York Times and Ipsos found that Americans believe that abortion, LGBTQ issues, and climate change concern Democrats more than the cost of living. I mean, talk about a disordered, like you're living in a disordered world. And so right now the Democrats are in this disordered world that doesn't reach, say, the average American. And then you get, I think that personally, hot take, Democrats hate JD Vance so much. And you see Father James Martin sniping on this, nakedly partisan.
It's
you just just do not like JD Vance. And I think big reason, they see him as a huge threat. He could very much become the president in 2028. He's sure poised for it right now.
It's not just that. He came super poor from Appalachia, and he wrote a book about all that. And everyone in the elite was like, "You're right. We haven't done enough for people of Appalachia. Yeah. That's terrible. I hate it." And he comes out initially and says, "Trump's not the answer, though." And he was anti-Trump in 2016. And the media's like, "Yes, we love you more."
JD.
They gave him a movie on Netflix, and they put him on. And all of a sudden, he starts waking up and realizes, "Now wait a minute. Now maybe Trump is my friend on this one." And also it's like, how dare you? So he's the apostate now because they welcomed him into Harvard and they welcomed him into the power, the halls of power. But then he's like, you guys are the problem. And then, he turned on them and they've turned on him. I do feel like he is the sharpest and most articulate spokesman. And he's so very nimble. He could be on TV every day. And eventually these reporters like Margaret Brennan, I realize we got to stop interviewing him. He's barbecuing us. He's great.
He's awesome.
All right. Slide Twilight Zone now. Josh, you're up first.
All right. So much stuff to talk about today. I love this. But, we had a lot of this stuff with the different agencies, like Pete Hegseth. He as soon as he got into there, he said, we're not going to do this Black History Month. We're not going to do all this stuff. We're going to focus on what our business of providing the most lethal workforce in the world, our military. And Duffy did the same thing. He's like, I got plane crashes to worry about. We're not doing Black History Month and all this other stuff. Done. We're done with that. And so I just wanted to share, I thought, a really good clip. This is from several years ago.
It's vintage.
February 1st is the beginning of Black History Month. Mike Wallace had on Morgan Freeman at 60 Minutes a few years ago, and he asked him about it. I just love this clip.
It's a great clip.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? Well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Oh.
Okay. Which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh. Why not?
No.
Do you want one?
No.
All right. I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
Amen.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it.
Yes.
I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
Mm-hmm.
I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman. You're going to say, well, I know this white guy named Mike Wallace. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Oh man, he's uncomfortable.
I love it.
He didn't even know what to do. That was great.
But our elites are like, well, this is the way we throw trinkets at people to show them that we care. Like, yes, stop doing cheap grace.
Right. It is cheap grace.
It's stupid.
It's divisive. Yeah. Love it. That was great. I'd never seen that.
You're my man. I love you.
I want to say, hold up. I think he's back down from this. I don't want to be wrong, but I think he's kind of.
He might have.
All right. Well,
but it was a great moment.
That is a moment of truth, though.
Yes.
What
I'll
was
take
said
a moment of truth wherever it happens.
It's true.
Yeah. All right.
Absolutely.
Erica.
Yeah. Oh man, Morgan Freeman. We're watching the Ken Burns Civil War with the middle kids right now. And Morgan Freeman does Frederick Douglass's voice for that. And I just, every time Frederick Douglass is quoted, I'm like, oh, his voice is so beautiful. Speaking of Frederick Douglass and Black history.
Why are you going Frederick? Isn't that Frederick?
Yeah, isn't it Frederick?
Frederick Douglass? Sure. Sorry. I was going all German. I'm just my German showing.
Erica, it's my job to mispronounce words in this.
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Especially years in American history. My
here.
apologies. Oh my goodness. C words purchase, C words folly. Oh yeah.
Hey, the Alaskan backed me on that, by the way.
Yeah, whatever.
BT dubs.
Okay. Back at it. So while some of our agencies have foregone all of the months, the Pride Month, the Trans Visibility Month, the Black History Month, the White House actually put out a proclamation for Black History Month, and it's actually pretty refreshing. So if we have to have Black History Month, if it is here to stay, which I don't know if it necessarily is, here's how it goes. Throughout our history, Black Americans have been among our country's most consequential leaders, shaping the cultural and political destiny of our nation in profound ways. Here it comes. American heroes such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Thomas Sowell, Justice Clarence Thomas, and countless others represent what is best in America and her citizens. Did you hear the names in that list, everyone? Did you hear Clarence Thomas?
Yeah, one of the greatest living
left
Americans.
Has crucified as being like an Uncle Tom. Thomas Sowell, like this was, if we have to do Black History Month, we have named some amazing Black Americans. Yeah, remember when, when Ketanji Brown Jackson was confirmed to the Supreme Court and like multiple news sources go, oh my gosh, it's the first Black American on the Supreme Court. And you're like, what? What about Clarence Thomas?
I got
what about Thurgood Marshall?
Maybe the third?
Yeah, she's actually the third. Oh, right, because they were
one
like,
of my favorite.
Second.
This never gets old.
Thurgood Marshall.
I watch this like once a month. It's Joe Biden questioning Clarence Thomas.
Oh, this is
good morning, Judge. Welcome to the blinding lights.
Oh.
Finding out what you mean when you say that you would apply the natural law philosophy to the Constitution is, in my view, the single most important task of this committee.
Senator Biden was very focused on natural law. How did that go?
Who knows? I have no idea what he was talking about.
I just want to make sure we all know what we're talking about here, that you and I know at least what we're talking about here. There's a fervent and aggressive school of thought that wishes to see natural law further inform the Constitution than it does now, argued against by the positivists led by Judge Bork. Now again, that may be lost on all the people. You know and I know what we're talking about.
I have to be perfectly honest with you. You sit there and you have no idea what they are talking about.
Well, I don't think they took a great clip.
All I know is that he was asking me these questions about natural law.
Someone may apply it in a way.
He's like, he has no idea what he's talking about.
I mean, that one clip on its own, he would understand, but the greater clip, Biden was getting into this politics.
Biden just went on and on. I watched that when, yes. Anyway, it was, Biden had no idea what he was talking about, and it just became abundantly clear that he was just on and on, trying to sound like he'd actually graduated at the top of his law school class, which he never did.
But you mentioned Frederick Douglass. The next time you head over to my alma mater of Hillsdale, you can see the statue of Frederick Douglass. He spoke there not once but twice.
It's awesome. Hillsdale.
Okay. What was that documentary called, by the way? The Amazon Prime Clarence Thomas. It was so good.
I'll look it up.
That is what that clip is from that documentary. It goes through his life.
Created
it's
Equal,
amazing.
I think it's called. But
yeah, Created Equal or All Men Are Equal. Yeah.
All right. So my Twilight Zone, again, a little bit of a quiz today. So there are now protests, anti-ICE protests going on in, I believe, Alameda Street in LA. And people are waving, blocking the freeway, waving Mexican flags. So I'm going to read you a quote. I'm going to have you guess who said this quote. And if I'm honest with myself, I must admit that I'm not entirely immune to such nativist sentiments. When I see Mexican flags waved at pro-immigration demonstrations, I sometimes feel a flush of patriotic resentment. When I'm forced to use a translator to communicate with the guy fixing my car, I feel a certain frustration.
Oh, yours truly does know the answer to this question.
Karen Bass.
No.
President Barack Obama.
That is Barack Obama from his book, The Audacity of Hope in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the window dressing to show like, yeah, even some of these guys are a little crazy. I'm not too radical. Baloney.
Yeah. So listen, I see these protests. I feel like they're maybe a great opportunity for ICE to stop by. I don't think that it's a very convincing argument that you really care about America and you're ready to become citizens when you're waving flags from other countries. I just feel like this is insane. I don't even have a deep philosophical point about this. I'm just, why would this make me want to make you disrupting traffic, causing problems?
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I'm confused. I have been reliably informed that they're just as American as someone who's born in this country.
I don't know.
Can someone help me
You
with
were
this? I'm
misinformed.
confused. I mean, it's not like these guys are a 3-hour bus ride from their homeland if they really hate it here so much.
Yeah. And a point too, before Mexico caved to the tariff imposition, the president on Friday, I think it was, she tweeted out that the Mexican government was in full support of the Mexican nationals here in the United States. So she's not even pretending that they're trying to assimilate. She's like, no, we have nationals in the United States and we support them being there. We will try to keep them there. It was, yeah, we were misinformed, Josh. They're not.
I mean, the thing is, like the lists of evils in this country, there's so many. Obviously, we are more rightly upset by abortion, the mutilation of children or whatever. But I got to tell you, just from a populist standpoint, anything that Trump would do to break up these kind of a-hole protesters, and not just the ones that are like with the Mexican flags. I'm talking about like the white commie liberals from Minneapolis too, that take over the freeways too. Any executive order Trump put on because, freeways are, federal, like it's send in the National Guard and break them up. He would have like 95% approval on anything he does to stop that stuff.
This has always been frustrating, but it's especially frustrating when these are not even people from our country. Didn't he put forward a executive order on college students, international college students that come over and then they protest for Palestine or whatever? Like, again,
For
you can
Hamas
hold your opinions on that.
when they protest.
But you can have your opinions on that.
He's like, you're out, and he kicks him out.
You can have opinions on that. You are a guest in our country. In any other country, this is not even like, you'd be laughed out of Japan. If you went to Japan and you're like, hey, I'm here to protest what's going on in some other country. In a country, I'm not even.
And your country sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, what are we talking about? And like, no, there'd be no Father
You're lucky
James
we don't
Martin.
throw you in a volcano. I mean, it's such an a-hole attitude. Golly.
No, there'd be no Father James Martin chiming in, being about, wow, this country's a nation of immigrants. This is so disrespectful. Like every other country can have national sovereignty except the United States.
I know.
And
if
I will.
America's just an idea. Go have that idea in your own country.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say these days are coming to an end, it looks like, and I cannot be more happy for it. I really think, and go read the full speech. It's Theodore Roosevelt talks about we have no space here for a hyphenated Americanism. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's people that are like, oh, I'm Italian American, I'm this and that. To me, a completely different concept than what's been going on over the last 20 years of people just sneaking in, living, being abused themselves and then abusing the laws of this country, all for very selfish gains, no intention to build, assimilate, anything like that. And I'm not saying this is everyone, right? There's good examples, but if you want to look at the scales right now, we've been tipped much too far in the illegal immigration variety that unfortunately has been murdering American citizens and just causing all these kind of problems. I don't have room for hyphenated Americanism. You're American, you contribute to the project here, you want to build a great country that you want to live in. That's what I have space for. I really have so little tolerance for everything else. That's where I'm at. Angry Populist Tom.
Yeah, he showed up.
So, and I'm not alone. That's Theodore Roosevelt, all right? Former president. Not just me.
They took him down too. New York, the statue.
Yep.
By the way, actually,
he's going
this
back.
this is my little free. I submitted a little an idea up the flagpole. What I'd like to see. So Donald Trump actually in 2017 put out a presidential proclamation reminding people that by law it's actually still George Washington's birthday. It's not President's Day. So just remember that. But we are people, creatures in habit. And so here's my recommendation. I use a few intermediaries to try to pass this idea along. Who knows if it'll go anywhere? But I would love to see Donald Trump actually this year call on Congress to change the day so that the actual day off is February 22nd. So it'll come not just on a Monday. It'll be, oh, wait, why don't we have school today? Why are the banks closed on a Wednesday?
I love it.
It's because the father of our country, not all presidents, Franklin Pierce and all this other, who cares? James Buchanan, give me a break. Joe Biden.
Sorry, Franklin.
Give me a break.
From New Hampshire.
George W. Bush, give me a break.
But the father of our country, it would make sense to have it be the actual
special
day.
place, the original George W., the one that was actually worth something.
Oh, Tony with breaking news in the chat. Marco Rubio appointed acting administrator of USAID.
Perfect.
Not a surprise. Marco, I'm not tired of the W's. Keep it coming, man.
So, someone call it the Loopcast bump.
Yep, totally.
Some would say, not me.
It's not inaccurate.
Some would say. Some are saying. Not me, but some are saying. Thank you guys for joining today's episode. A lot of fun. We covered a lot of topics. If you want to help us out, join the Champions Club. Best way to support us, catholicvote.org/champions. I appreciate all the feedback. I got a lot of emails. If you'd like to email me, loopcast@catholicvote.org. I keep getting emails from females in the military that have the coolest call signs. I got an email from someone call sign chainsaw. Like, how could I argue against this woman chainsaw?
That is awesome. That actually might be my favorite call sign after.
That's pretty awesome.
Do you know that the actor who played, Ewan McGregor, he played Obi-Wan in, the early Star Wars movies. Well, his brother was in the Royal Air Force. And so his call sign was Obi-2.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great trivia.
So if you have questions for me, loopcast@catholicvote.org. If you want to help out the show, you can subscribe here on YouTube. That's where we keep most of our content, but you can find us anywhere. Go check us out on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you like to get your podcasts. Leave us a review, Apple Podcasts. I also, another interesting tidbit. I'm sorry, I keep going. We've been getting some I wanted to like this podcast, but you guys are just MAGA pretending to be Catholic. And I was like, we've been getting a lot of angry reviews. I'm like, I wonder if other Catholic shows are experiencing this. And sure enough, I go over to Pints with Aquinas or whatever, and they're getting angry MAGA stuff. And it actually reminded me, I'm like, people are actually mad that Trump is president right now. I'm like, this has been the greatest 2 weeks of my entire political life. How are people not? This is
like what the swamp feels like all the time. Like
this is the best.
Winning and winning and winning and winning. And now
I know. I'm like, how could you be mad about this? So anyway, if you want to go bolster us on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and send a review to match out some of the angry people. But great show. Pray for us. It's the best thing you can do. St. Thomas More, St. Thomas, or St. Fidelis in Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pray for us, and we will see you guys.